Buckle up for AEC Trailblazers, the Founders Files, where we crack open the stories of the brightest minds in the AEC startup scene. Forget institutional pitches. We're diving deep into the real personal journeys of these industry disruptors. Get ready for some casual chats firsthand.
Hello, and welcome everybody to another episode of the AEC Trailblazers podcast, where we interview the most amazing founders of the tech scene of the AEC. Today with us, we have Zach Zeal. He's the co-founder and CEO of Rhumbix, a groundbreaking field and workforce management platform designed to revolutionize construction through paperless timekeeping and real-time productivity insights. He's a former U.S. Navy SEAL civil engineer, the Corps officer. Zach's leadership is fueled by his experience on megaprojects with Bechtel, and his deep technical expertise included 2 master's degrees from Stanford. Under his guidance, Rhumbix is transforming how contractors manage labor and product data, driving better margins and on-time, on-budget product delivery. Zach, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Valentin. Excited to be here.
Let me say something. That's impressive. Now, you not only be on the Navy, but you also went to Stanford and you also co-founded a startup. It's just a lot.
It's been a good 41 years of life. It still feels like in many ways just getting started.
You're making me feel that I haven't done much with my life. So that's what you have done. But curious, after you decided to start construction before the Army, during the Army, after the Army, or how?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think a lot of people in the industry kind of were raised around the industry. So my dad worked for Multi-Equip, sells compaction equipment, generators, vibratory rollers. And so he was a Midwest sales rep, grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. And as a kid, I had a trailer full of construction equipment in the driveway a lot of days out of the week. And so, kind of naturally gravitated towards that industry and had a curiosity around the industry. And then joined the Navy shortly after September 11th. I was a senior in high school when that happened. And then had the opportunity to go into the Civil Engineer Corps. And so that was kind of a natural place for me in the Navy, combining my love of construction and gave me the opportunity to go start managing projects right out of the gate as a 22-year-old. And so I think combination of growing up around the industry and also having an opportunity to join the CBs, which is the construction battalions within the Navy, was a natural fit for me in terms of my active duty service.
That's so interesting. After service, you decided, I'm gonna keep doing this.
I mean, it wasn't always that clear cut. So I did 5 years on active duty, and then was fortunate to get into business school at Stanford and did a dual degree in construction. And actually, I wrote my career vision essays about going to work for the construction industry, for folks like Skanska, URS, or Bechtel. And it was during the course of my graduate degrees and summer internships, really, where I decided to pivot away from going to work for some of the largest builders in the world and start Rhumbix, which was kind of born of pains I'd personally experienced and not having accurate real-time data from the field to help manage projects.
And you make it sound easier when you started. I don't mean to sound that you're old guy, but you started this 11 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I bet things were completely different as they are right now, right?
Absolutely. There was no construction specific venture capital funds. Actually, Darren Bechtel co-led our seed round. I remember him telling my co-founder and I, just so you know, no other VCs care about construction. And this was in, the summer of 2014. And that was the reality of it. Chris Rogers had just started the Society for Construction Solutions. There was one chapter in San Francisco Bay Area. He was still at McCarthy working on innovation at the time. Those early meetings, there was, probably about 20 entrepreneurs around the table. It was, folks like Eve and Javed from Fieldwire, Justin Devan from Building Connected, Tracy and Ralph from PlanGrid. It was very easy to kind of count on your hands and toes, how many construction tech startups there were back in 2014. So it was definitely challenging. There was a lot of having to educate financiers, especially about the opportunity in the construction industry and about why it hadn't digitized yet, what were the specific dynamics that would make it hard or easy, to bring, in our case, the kind of wave of iPhones and iPads and Android devices out in the field, which was the mobile wave that was kind of breaking, that PlanGrid really started back in 2012 when they got founded. But it was definitely the Wild Wild West, and not as many of the kind of investors and product categories that there are today.
No, absolutely. Like, I'm actually surprised for the amount of VCs that are just focused on the AC. Lately, every day there is a new one that only specifically invests on AC startups. So I feel that's really cool. But besides VCs, do you see a change in terms of companies buying this type of products or clients from the AC? You also think that things have changed on how you have to sell or approach them as well?
Yeah, I think the industry as a whole follows the crossing the chasm framework that Jeffrey Moore lays out in his book by the same title, where you've got the innovators and the real early adopters. And, it's not surprising to know that these people worked at DPR and, they were an early customer and stuff like that. But, one of our first companies was Anvil Builders, kind of a local heavy civil contractor here in the space, in the Bay Area. A couple of trade contractors, all it really took was the leadership had a conviction around technology and saw what was possible. A lot of times this might have been accompanied with, a family-run business being turned over to the next generation, and somebody who's more of a digital native, saying, why are we still doing this on paper? But it was, fast forward 10 years later, and it's if you're still doing it on paper, you feel like you really are one of the last remaining analog companies out there. So you've kind of moved to the early majority, the late majority, and then the laggards kind of coming online. But I'm surprised every week, we'll come across a company that's doing hundreds of millions of revenue, and their primary source of data capture in the field is paper or Excel or a fillable PDF that doesn't really allow any sort of insights. It's just simply capturing the data in a static form. And so, long-winded way of saying, like, the industry has changed a lot, but also, I think when I started the business, I thought we'd be a lot further 10 years down the road than we are as a whole. But the reality I've learned is, like, at the end of the day, it's all about change management. And there's a certain amount of, you can't speed that up too much, because the organization will kind of, reject the organ transplant of the new software, so to speak. And, that's been one of the biggest learnings for me. It's like a lot of hand holding, a lot of education. And then, once you do that, you become an integral part of their everyday business processes. But everybody's really starting in a different place. Some companies, we've had to help them buy iPads, as a precursor to actually deploying Rhumbix. And, that's fine. They're great customers once they get up and rolling. But especially in the trade contractor side of the house, you're not as able to hire people that have technical talent. It's a different kind of candidate profile in a lot of respects than you get at the larger general contractors, especially at the nationwide ones. And so, at times that IT leader is doing double duty as the controller or the CFO or the payroll administrator. And so, again, it's just how the industry is, and that's part of kind of what you need to learn in order to be successful in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there is a valid point on, you can be innovative, but in our industry, it's not like, if you compare it to, the B2C market, where you just sell to consumers and the most modern and innovative things wins. I think in our industry, for sure, you can be innovative and do something really cool, but you need to think about implementation, because it's not like other industries that you just upload an app to a store and then people just download it and use it. It is more of like, hey, I'm going to hold your hands and help you through the whole process, even if it means help you buy an iPad for you to use the app, or like, absolutely, it makes sense. And you also brought a really, I think, really interesting topic, which is workforce, right? That we were just speaking about that before we started the recording. Is that most startups? Actually, we did a study on the amount, right? Like 70% of the AC startups target the design phase and not the construction phase. And from the ones on the construction phase, many of them target supply chain, and not that many target the workforce management. Why do you think that's the case when every construction site needs people? So why do you think that's happening?
Yeah, it shocks me as well. I think, the first thing out of every construction executive's mouth, in terms of challenges they struggle with is labor. I can't get the right labor, enough labor to support the work that we see in our backlog, the work that we see, coming down the pipeline. And at the same time, there are more people exiting the construction workforce than there are entering. And so the workforce as a whole is shrinking. And so, I think there's a couple different ways to address that. One is, more people top of the funnel into the trades. And there actually have been a lot of companies focused on trying to build a LinkedIn for construction, including LinkedIn themselves. So I know people over there, they killed that project. The job board, the placement agencies. And, I can't tell you why those have all failed, but they have. It's just been very hard to build, a critical mass of kind of LinkedIn for construction, so to speak. What we focus on, which kind of goes back to my background working with Bechtel, which is like, okay, how can you get more out of the labor that you have? When we started Rhumbix in 2014, we combined timekeeping and production tracking data. And so you've got your input and output. That's quite literally the definition of productivity. And at the time, no other software had both of those things in the same software platform. And so it was very revolutionary. I think the reality is, to kind of answer your question about why more people don't focus on it, is I think a lot of the entrepreneurs haven't been exposed to self-performed craft. They come up through an innovation role at a general contractor where they're doing pre-construction, they're doing design work. And so the challenges that they're experiencing, lead them to start companies that address workflows that are primarily done on a desktop computer by somebody sitting either in the trailer or at the home office. I've been out in the field my entire career. Love rolling up my sleeves and running crews and being on the job sites. And we were talking beforehand. The last job I was on with Bechtel, it was a 27 million man-hour job. That was just a direct labor. There was another, I think, 10 million of indirects, and a job had 7,000 craft on it every day, and it ran a day shift, a night shift, 24/7 around the clock. And every week, one of the crews swapped out for another crew, and Rhumbix was born of the inability to actually manage that project to better outcomes because the data was poor and it was not timely. We would get 1,000 paper time cards every day. It took 3 to 4 days for a 70-person clerical staff to translate to English, put into an Excel spreadsheet that was uploaded into an Access database that Bechtel homegrown software. We were able to then begin looking at the data, and as we began auditing it, a lot of it was inaccurate. It was the wrong cost codes, the wrong work area. And, by the time we found those errors and we're trying to understand where the work should have actually been charged to in terms of cost codes, I couldn't tell you what I had, for lunch last week. You're expecting somebody to say what they worked on, when they're working 12-hour shifts every day. And so that was kind of the big light bulb epiphany moment. So I think, I had direct exposure to these problems, which just kind of led me to focus on it. And I think it is a unique opportunity that, I had my professional career in the construction industry that, combined with going to business school at Stanford and learning how to do startups, kind of led me down the current path that we're on. But, I think if you don't have that exposure, you don't know to start a business.
That's true. That's absolutely true. You're more prone to develop something that can immediately be implemented, right? Because if I, let's say, do an automation to print drawings or whatever you do on a computer, somebody can just download it and use it. While if you want to do a software to manage your workforce, you have to sell it to an actual company and they have to implement it with real people. And it is much more work. For sure, it brings a lot of value, but That also is another reason, I guess, why people are not targeting it, right? And also the fact that people are not exposed typically to those kind of environments. You're more on an innovation role, like you said.
Yeah, I think part of it. I mean, you hit the the nail on the head, to use a horrible construction analogy. But actually, when we started Rhumbix, the first product we came out with was not solving the real problem. So, I call this a byproduct of being on Stanford's campus and drinking the Kool-Aid and breathing the rarefied air. But so I came back from the copper mine. One of the other things that I was doing down there was time and motion studies. And so to do this, we had to request a asset from headquarters, or a regional kind of asset that would come out with a clipboard and a stopwatch, and every 5 minutes do statistical process sampling. What percent of the workforce are standing idle, what percent are actually engaged at work at the work phase, hauling materials, et cetera, et cetera. And so the original idea for Rhumbix was to use wearables to passively detect data. So, the seed round that we raised with Darren, we were, back then, this was pre Apple Watch. Fitbit was one of the few wearables that parsed all the accelerometer data on device. So you weren't able to get the raw 9-axis GMU data. So we were hacking Samsung Gear Live watches and soldered extra batteries on them, and we were strapping them onto the forearms of a underground utility pipeline contractor on Stanford's campus. And V1 was to try to do what a Fitbit or a Whoop does, to try to passively collect both the productivity data, but also the job cost information. And what we realized was, the market for that was very small. The Bechtels, the Kiewits, the Floors of the world knew what to do with that productivity data. But the larger market was like, if you can just get rid of all the paper on the job site, I'll buy that solution from you today. And if you hear that enough times, which we did, we pivoted away from the wearables. We said, hey, we really like the health and safety aspect of the wearables, the ability to kind of, take a skin temperature and identify people that are at higher risk of heat stroke and heat stress injuries. So we can always layer that back on, after the fact. But, if we're not a company at that point, there's no opportunity to do that. And so, we pivoted to, instead of passively detecting the data that we wanted to collect, let's just make it really easy to actively collect that. Let's focus on the user interface for the field. Let's focus on making that highly configurable, because we know every project's got kind of, owner and different project development requirements. And so it was a big shift, but it was shifting to the problem that the industry was actually asking for us to solve, versus, doing something really neat and high tech and say, hey, isn't this great? Don't you want to buy it? Which, 10 years later, I think weight caps had some good success out in the Middle East, doing something similar, but there's still nobody in the construction industry in the US that's doing anything related to wearables. So it was absolutely the right call to kind of meet the market where they were. Which means you had to leave Stanford's campus to do that. Not necessarily a bunch of smart people and whiteboards to figure that out.
No, and I think it's a great story of a pivot, and it's true. There are not that many companies doing that, and there are some that are doing, instead of just wearables, is just cameras, and then they can detect the emotions through cameras. That I think it's tough. It's tough how you make everybody to use a wearable on an environment that it's not friendly, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So we were the first day we were hooking up the workers. We had 3 different managers from the local labor unions that were very curious. We brought a bunch of donuts and burritos and stuff they hand out to people, so you can always kind of win them over that way. But they liked the wearables because they wanted to show how productive union labor was versus non-union labor. If that data was ever going to be used, to let go of a worker, they were opposed to it. And so there was a lot of social headwinds that also just, in terms of the early days of a business, you got to get revenue and you got to get it quick. And so it was very clear at a certain point that we needed to kind of set that on the side burner and pivot into a product that we could sell today to customers.
It's great that you took that decision, right? It's because you're here now. So, and I'm curious, with all the data that you help your clients to manage, and the fact that, like you said, less and less people is getting into the industry, and that's a big problem. And you need to find better ways to keep the ones that are really good, retain them, and make sure that or make them more efficient. But based on all the implementations you have done, what are the I think the top three outcomes of analyzing this data? It's retaining people? Is it improving the way they work? Or what are the top three outcomes that you get?
Yeah. A lot of companies don't have a system in place to standardize how they track productivity and production. So I use one example, a customer we love up in Canada, Thomas Cavanaugh. They're basically said since deploying Rhumbix, we now know daily how profitable we are on job sites. We also are able to bid projects quicker. We're able to bid at a lower rate than we did previously and execute that work with a higher profit margin. The byproduct of that is nobody can compete with us in our market, and we're growing faster than we've ever grown as a business. And so they're like, you guys are very much a part of our secret sauce. It was like, don't tell our competition. I was just like, hey, like real-time accurate data allows us to take more risk on the bid. But it's actually not more risk. They're bidding lower, which historically would have been more risk, but they've got better controls in place to be able to say real time and manage that production and understand, hey, if a project's getting off, is this a change order situation? What's going on here? Maybe we just bid that incorrectly. Let's manage that cost overrun as best we can and not do it again in the future. Yes, that's one example. Another large, ENR top 400, contractor said, if we can bring, the lowest performing crews up to par with the highest performing crews, it's a 9-figure cost savings, like at least $100 million a year. Our software alone won't do that. That takes a lot of change management, but it helps to measure and instrument and be able to kind of understand that. Across the board, we've heard folks, Sprig Electric down in San Jose. I used to have a cost code that was just called the garbage bin, and it was just we didn't know where these hours went, and so as a result, a couple, 3-4% of hours ended up just getting thrown in the garbage bin, and now there's no garbage bin. Like every hour is assigned to a cost code. It's all tracked. You're able to actually better understand and manage your business to these unit rates that are kind of forward indicator of profitability and on-time project delivery. And so, there's just a couple examples off the top of my mind, of kind of how customers and clients are using our software to better improve their self-reform field operations.
Interesting. I'm just curious because it is like we said, it is a problem. Workforce is a problem, and efficiency is also a problem. But do you think, for sure, let's say everybody uses Rhumbix and the efficiency goes to the roof. Do you think that's going to be enough for the future? Or what else should companies start doing to keep up with this lack of people in our industry?
Yeah, I think we're seeing, in the 10 years, 11 years I've been running Rhumbix, the industrialized construction and the offsite, has kind of had fits and starts. And obviously there's a giant 2 billion crater that Katerra left in the industry of money that was lit on fire. And, the idea wasn't wrong. I think you've had James Benham on the show. I remember hearing him on his podcast or something back in the day saying, in 1915, you could get a modular log cabin in the Sears Roebuck catalog. So, literally for 110 years, we've had modular, residential homes that you could order. So, I think what, though, has really driven it is where we're seeing niche applications like data centers. And so you've got, folks that are doing a lot of the fabrication of either the racks, the mechanical, the electrical systems. People that are going after that scope of work are beginning to build specific facilities that do exactly that. DPR's got a facility, SurePods down in Arizona. They do a lot of prefabricated bathroom pods, for a hospital, for example. And so I think offsite prefabrication is going to continue to be a part of the solution and will grow in terms of the scope. Of how much work is done offsite and then just brought to the job site pre-assembled. The other that I'm really excited about that I think we're just starting to see, the kind of the first real project impacts is robotics. And so, I've seen, some of the companies, Sam, the bricklaying robot back in the day when we started Rhumbix in 2015 and 2016. But now you've got like Canvas doing drywall. You've got Dusty and Rugged Robotics doing site layout. And I think we're still probably 5 to 10 years away from, what I'd say is kind of like the next generation of robots on job sites. But I think it's going to come quickly because I think you're going to see the convergence of the large language models with robotics, for stuff like elder care and factory line workers within the next 3 to 4 years. And it's probably not going to be more than 5 to 10 years until you see that jump over the construction industry, driven because of the, huge shortage that we have in labor. If you look at, there's actually a video, I think, it's probably 10 years old at this point, of a humanoid robot hanging drywall. And it was from Japan. And so Japan's had a labor shortage for a lot longer than the United States. And so you can already see, a decade ago, folks trying to address that shortage with some of these humanoid robots. But I think you'll begin to see that probably in the 5 to 10 year horizon. Dangerous tasks. I know Henning Riddell, former DPR employee, is working on an arm for electrifying and flipping switches on a switch gear. And so I think high risk, dangerous jobs, hard to reach jobs. We've had drones doing inspections and stuff for a while. I think that's where we're going to see a continued kind of growth, because I think like Dusty is a great use case, like site layout. Yeah, let's get rid of chalk lines. nobody needs to be snapping chalk lines. But I think we'll actually begin to kind of continue to see that the use cases on job sites, more and more of them just being like a robot can do that, a robot can do that. Material handling's a perfect example, right? Like so many people waiting for a buck hoist or a lift to get up and down a job site. How do you increase productivity? How about you just have people not waiting in lines for the lift to get up and down the job site on vertical construction? That's a great place to start.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that those are great examples of, and there is so much more that it can be done by robots nowadays. It's like you said, Dusty is a great example, but there are so many other things that we still do. There are manual stuff that it doesn't make any sense. Even like I heard a company that when I was working on a casino that there was an existing structure and they didn't know where all the revars were. Like they don't have a clue, right? And they had to do a lot of shafts and the problem was if you had to go and manually scan everything with X-ray, it was a kind of work of weeks. Yeah. So the idea was, hey, why not doing a robot that can map that overnight, right? When nobody's working, just map the whole thing and try to do the experiment. They were not successful, but I feel that it is going to come sooner than what we expect. That we're going to have more and more robots, and also the road laying bricks is a good example that at the beginning it was even slower than a person, but that's the way to start, right? Like let's just do it, and eventually we're going to get to a point that it's so much faster that it's going to be a no-brainer for everybody.
Yeah, it's not taking jobs away. I think the Canvas example is a good one where you still have 2 carpenters running the drywall finishing robot. But they do the work of a 10-person crew, in half the time. And so, again, like the construction industry is very fortunate in that there is more work out there than there are people to physically do that work in the US and globally, as well. And so it's ripe for these kind of solutions to amplify the folks that we do have so that you can get a 5x output, per worker, because that's ultimately what's going to be needed to build more affordable housing, build the data centers that are going to underlie all the AI and AGI kind of applications. Like, doesn't seem like the world's going to slow down anytime soon.
No, absolutely. Every time someone says like, "Oh, people are going to lose their jobs," it's not. It's the opposite. We're going to build more stuff. It's going to be that we're going to build more houses, more infrastructure, more data centers. Like, it's quite the opposite. Like,
if you can cut the price of a house in half, you open up home ownership to a huge swath of the population that feels like they're never going to reach that because it's so unaffordable in many geographies today. And so, to your point, like technological innovation, I think can drive down the cost. And whether it's corporations or folks, building real estate development, like, that just means my dollar goes twice as far in terms of the capital improvements that we're putting in place. And I think a lot of opportunity domestically. You're already seeing kind of the move to reshore a lot of manufacturing, and it's a very kind of virtuous cycle. And then I think globally, India is going to very quickly become the third largest construction market in the world, behind the U.S. and China. I think there's some crazy stat. I think like in the next 7 years, it's like a 10x, expected growth in that market alone.
It's insane. Yeah, it's just insane. But yeah, I also agree on something that sometimes people are afraid when you start measuring productivity, right? Like they're gonna realize that I'm not efficient enough, and I feel it's a good thing because if someone is not efficient, you can help them. Like, hey, you're not being efficient for this reason. Do this, this, and that, and you're gonna be as efficient as other people. Or you can make them realize, like, hey, this job is not for you, and you're not efficient most likely because you don't like it, or because maybe just do this instead. And I think it's always a good opportunity if you stay open. It's the opposite. It's never a problem for anybody if you're just measuring. It's win-win for everybody, I guess.
No, I how you use that data, and we've tried to be very careful about this. Workers first is one of our core values, and for a long time we were very resistant to geo tracking of kind of what was being done because we never wanted Rhumbix to be used to fire somebody. In the last couple quarters, we've introduced the ability to clock in, take a photo of your face, take a geolocation of where you are. And we had a long conversation before we built that functionality, but it's like, actually the market is telling us we have a problem with fraud and they want a solution that deals with wage theft and fraud. And so, we were able to say, hey, like, we're not trying to protect people that are committing fraud on the job site. That is antithetical to kind of our culture and mission. So we're okay going to this feature, and deploying it. But most of the people that we sell our product to who are wanting to measure productivity are wanting to do so with the purpose of bringing everyone up and, identifying, hey, there's a crew doing this work better than anyone else in the company. Like, great. Let's spread that best practice to everyone. And, to the example I used earlier, one of the top GCs in America, 9-figure cost savings.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. And I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit naive. I think that 99.9% of people are always doing the right thing. Like they're not about people committing fraud, but there is that really, really small percentage, and that ruins it all, right? Because if I'm doing my job and the other guy is not doing it, I'm going to get pissed, right? And I will never like to do my job right if the other people are not doing it. So I think it's a win-win. Like most people do the right things. So
yeah, like I said, we talked about earlier, number one thing CEOs tell me is like, I have trouble attracting and retaining the talent that we have. And so like quite literally, they're like, yeah, I would like to develop people into better workers so that they stay with us. We're investing in their future. They've got a long career. They're not looking to go elsewhere. It's very rarely do we hear like, I want this software so I can micromanage all my crews and get rid of the worst people. That's the profile of a business that's not growing in today's economy. That's they're more afraid of kind of what they're losing than what they have to gain from building a better business and scaling best practices.
No, absolutely. And I'm also curious, given the fact that you have told us all the stuff that you have built, what's coming for Rhumbix in the next, 3-4 years. I'm not going to say 10 or 20, because who knows where the world is going to be in 20 years, but 3-4 years, what's coming for you guys?
Yeah, no, super excited. As we release that clock in, clock out functionality, it's really moving more into the world of worker profiles. So kind of as we talked about, a lot of these workers are transient. They don't really have a kind of record of the work that they've done. If they've ever worked with a company using Rhumbix, by virtue of digitizing the time cards, every cost code has a noun, adjective, and a verb, so we have a good both qualitative and quantitative record of that they've done. So the first application we building out more of that worker profile functionality. Think of it as like a back of a baseball card statistics, so that the companies themselves can say, hey, I'm bidding this specific type of job. Who do I have that's done this type of work before, that's worked with this client, as we're kind of beginning to put together our labor plan and schedule people for the project. Those sorts of insights largely don't exist today because that data is in physical file folders and file cabinets, and it's inaccessible. And so creating better tools to help companies maximize the ROI of their human capital by putting them on the right jobs with the right crew mixes that optimize, we have the ability to kind of show, what is the production unit per dollar based on the crew mix, based on, especially when you're thinking about, I've got level 1, 2, 3 apprentices, I've got journeymen, I've got foremen. The combination of all those things is going to dictate a blended, crew rate. And I've got a corresponding production output that we capture as well. And so, the best companies are doing that extremely manually right now. And so the ability to automate that is where we're heading in the near future.
Interesting. That's going to add a lot of value for companies, I'm sure.
Yeah, I could optimize your crew mix, right? Like if I can get as much output at a lower blended wage rate, I've got more margin. I'm more profitable. I'm executing the work better. And like I said, yeah, that's something that the best companies have typically a 30-year industry veteran who's doing it very meticulously on Excel spreadsheets. And we already capture all the data to be able to kind of surface those insights. And we'll be doing that kind of towards the tail end of next year and this year and next year.
Exciting. Oh, for sure, exciting. And that will allow companies to be even more efficient. So love it. I don't want to take more of your time because I know you're a busy guy. But before we wrap this up, can I ask you a couple of ping pong questions?
Sure thing.
Can you tell me a great AC software besides Rhumbix?
I frequently refer to PlanGrid. It was the first software anyone in the construction industry liked using. Before that, you had to have an instruction manual. You had to go to class for a week to learn how to use it, and intuitive user interface that really kind of broke open the floodgates, so to speak, for the rest of us that came after.
Yeah, absolutely. Those guys did a hell of a job putting together that product, and great exit. But
wow, Tracy was the CEO.
Yeah. All right. Next one is, what do you think is the next big trend in the AC?
I'll resist the easy AI, kind of answer. We talked about it. I think, there's been a lot of fits and starts with robotic companies, robotic autonomous, equipment on job sites. I think LLMs is a significant technological shift that's going to enable a lot more robotics on job sites. And I think that's a space I'd watch very carefully. It's going to be really exciting.
Yeah. No, absolutely. If you could collaborate with any person in history, which person would you choose?
Collaborate on a construction project or
whatever you can choose. Project, work, hobby, whatever you want.
In terms of construction, there's two jobs I think would have been super fascinating to be on. So Joseph Strauss was the chief engineer for the Golden Gate Bridge, and then Frank Crowe was the construction manager for the Hoover Dam. I think both of those. I drive across the Golden Gate every time I go into San Francisco, and it's still breathtaking, thousands of trips later. The Hoover Dam, you had to completely, divert the Colorado River and, to do that when they did in the 1940s with the lack of relative technology that they had then versus today, it's just kind of mind-numbing. On the Hoover Dam, it was 6 companies, and so there was this guy, Frank Crowe, was the construction manager in charge of all 6 companies, and so talk about a mess of a joint venture, but they got it done.
Oh, it's just insane. I saw the documentary, and it's just insane. It's like I always compare it with, sometimes people don't believe we went to the moon, right, in the 60s, because it was like, it's incredible. Hoover Dam is the same. Like it was a really long time ago, and nowadays be almost impossible to do. Imagine doing that like 80 years ago. Just insane.
Wild.
And last but not least, which is your favorite building in the world, and have you ever visited?
I'll give you two for this also. I haven't visited either. One would be the Sphere in Las Vegas because Rhumbix was deployed on that. So I'm very excited to go see a concert there. I've had a bunch of friends go and send me videos. That looks amazing. The other is Changi Airport in Singapore. I don't know if you've seen the new kind of facility that they built where basically the roof comes into a rain vortex and it's an indoor waterfall, and they've got just like these beautiful gardens, and I've never been, but it just looks like the best airport on the planet to ever go to. So I'm excited to visit it at some point.
Both of them are like, I used to live in Vegas, so I went one of the first days that the Sphere was open, so it's insane. And I also visited the Singapore airport, and it's just so different from the airports in the US or anywhere else. It's like it looks more like a mall than an actual airport. It's just insane.
Nice.
Yeah. But before we say goodbye to each other, can you tell everybody where they can know more about Rhumbix, or where they can contact you as well?
Yep. Rhumbix is RHUMBIX.com. I'm Zach Scheel. Look me up on LinkedIn. Feel free to add me, reach out to me. That's how Valentina and I got connected. So this podcast is proof that cold outreach works.
Absolutely. All right, man. Thanks so much for your time and for sharing all this great stuff you have done. So keep improving the AC.
Thank you.
All right, man. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks to our listeners. If you like this content, you can find past and upcoming episodes in ascworks.everse.com and at all of our Everse social media. We'd love to hear from you and recommendations for new content, so leave us a DM and we'll make sure to catch it.